Hey everybody, this is Dr. Gallegos and we are at lesson 1-6. Today we're going to follow up on what we've been talking about now for just a little bit. We've been talking about distance or length of a segment as it pertains to the number line. And today we're going to kind of follow up on that, continue on that discussion. Today we're talking about midpoint and how do we find that midpoint of a segment. So first off, let's do some vocabulary. So a midpoint of a line segment is the point that divides it into two congruent parts. And last lesson we talked about what congruent means, right? They have the same measure. And one of the ways that we were able to tell that, for example, A was congruent to M and AM was congruent to MB was that there's a hash mark or a line right in the middle of that gave us a clue that this was going to be equal to this. So we had some congruency here. So if we look at that, just kind of following up on that, if we look at AB above, we can see that M is the midpoint of segment AB. And then AM, segment AM and MB are congruent. So we can say segment AM is congruent, and that's the sign we use, right, for congruency. So AM is congruent to MB. Now, we can use what we know about midpoints to find the lengths of those segments. So let's kind of get into that. Okay, so here is our first example together. And in this example, we're working with this number line right here. So point A on this line is the midpoint of DF. So point A is the midpoint of segment DF. So what we want to do is we want to find the length of AF. Well, so if A is the midpoint of segment DF, then that means that DA is congruent to AF. So then if DA is 4 centimeters, which it says here, then AF is also going to be 4 centimeters. So here's a little bit of vocabulary. This word is a bisector. You only need to know it just for our purposes here, but it's a kind of a fun word to know. Bisector can be a line, segment, or a ray. So we're going to find out what a bisector is. So any line that intersects a segment at its midpoint, right here, is called a bisector. So let's look at this. We got another line here, TS, and then SR. We know that that point right there is in the center, and the distance from T to R is 10 inches. Now, here we have line N, and this is line N right here. And line N bisects TR at point S. So, can we find the length of TS if that's a bisector line? It cuts it in half. So because line N bisects TR right there at point S, that means that yes, point S is the midpoint of TR. So here's our formula. TS equal 1/2, right, of TR. So if we look at the diagram, we see that TR is 10 inches. Therefore, and I'm going to move myself away from here, therefore, TS is going to be 1/2 times 10. So TS is 10 divided by 2. 10 divided by 2 equals 5. So the length of TS is 5, and our unit of measure is inches. So the length of TS is 5 inches. All right, so on our try this section, we find that point F right here is the midpoint of EG. So then what we want to do is find the length of EG. Well, if point F is the midpoint of EG, then EG is going to be 2 times FG, right? All right, so EG equals 2 times FG. That's going to be our formula. EG equals 2 times FG. Now, so EG equal 2 times 18, right? Because FG is 18 millimeters. So I'm going to go over here to the side. 18 times 2. 8 times 2 is 16. Carry my 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Plus 1 is 3. So 36. So I would answer my question. The length of EG is 36, and my unit of measure, millimeters. 36 millimeters. Now you're going to work a little bit, and then you're going to come across, before you get to number 13, you're going to come across your try this, okay? So let's go through this one as well. So here we have point B, and point B is the midpoint of segment AD, okay? So segment AD all the way across here. All right, so point C is the midpoint of BD. So you got point C is midpoint of segment BD. So what we want to do is find the length of BC. All right, so here's what we do. Because point B right here is the midpoint of AD, that means that AB and BD are equal. So AB and BD are equal. All right, so we already know a little bit about that, right? So because point C is the midpoint of BD, then BC is 1/2. BC is 1/2 of BD, if that's going to be the midpoint. So we just have to divide the length of BD by 1/2. Well, so we said AB is 12. That means that BD is 12. And then BC is 1/2 times 12. So we have 12 divided by 2 equals 6. So the length of BC then, the length of BC is 6, and our unit of measure is feet. All right, a little bit of work to do, but just kind of pay attention to the lengths of equal sides. And in this case, BD is 12 feet. We know that because B is the midpoint there. And then what we were trying to find was half of that. So half of 12 gave us 6. All right, then I think it's your turn.